It's time for the Tactics Meeting, a program where we talk to subject matter experts about response tactics and technology. This episode is session 4 from the Tactics Conference that was held back in August of 2023. The topic was recruiting young talent. I think you're going to find our expert panel to be really interesting, so stick around. Today's episode of the Tactics Meeting is brought to you by Portage Bay Solutions and their Easy 213 application. The Easy 213 allows you to get that resource ordering process up and running in your command post quickly. Works with remote role players or remote participants, easy to do authorizations from the section chief and the resource unit leader, finance and logistics. Just solves all the problems that the paper process can have. So if you're getting ready for your big annual drill, or you're setting up for preparation for a worst case, consider Easy 213. And I thank Portage Bay for their ongoing support of the Tactics Meeting podcast. Save the date. Some events for your calendar. Coming up, we have the WSMIC member seminar. This will be held online Wednesday, November 15th. We'll give you all the information about participating in the umbrella plan in Washington State. We also have WSMIC's HAZWOPER refresher. We opened this up to members and other industry personnel last year, and we had some interest, enough interest that decided to open it up again this year. It will be both in person and available online on Wednesday, December 13th. And then we have the communications workshop. This is the second time we've done this workshop for PIOs, JIC members, liaison, and Unified Command communicators. It's co-sponsored by the Washington State Department of Ecology, Clean Rivers Cooperative, and the Tactics Meeting podcast, along with the Washington State Maritime Cooperative, and will be held in person in Portland on Wednesday, February 21st at the Clean Rivers Training Facility. To register for any of these events, you can go to terminus.us/events, where I've placed registration links for each one. Hope to see you there. Let's get to this amazing episode. And we're back. Welcome to session 4 of the Tactics Conference. Today we're going to be talking about empowering the next generation, strategies for recruiting young talent. And I think this is a really important topic because, as I said in the opening, so many of us are on the tail end of our careers, and yet we don't have a lot of people coming in at the bottom floor. We rely so heavily on recruiting out of the Coast Guard, out of the EPA, out of people's careers who are retiring, and yet every industry is struggling, whether it's emergency response or the military, or even McDonald's, for God's sakes, struggling to find employees. And so enticing, encouraging, making our industry desirable, and learning really what it is going to take to make a good work experience for Generation Z, which, let's face it, do not have the same priorities that my generation of baby boomers or Gen Xers or whatever the heck I am are. And I know this is near and dear to Mark Curtis's heart, who has a really quite amazing internship program at Crowley. And I think we heard in the very first session, we were talking about women in emergency response, how important it is to provide those mentoring relationships and those internship opportunities. So this will be great. And Mark, take it away.
Thanks, Dan. All right. So this isn't one panel. This is going to be two panels that are going to counterbalance. So the first panel is going to be made up of CEOs and leaders from the response community and people that advise on hiring and what kind of things we're seeing across all industries, as Dan just mentioned. So that's going to be the first 45 minutes ish. And then we're going to have the second of the panel, which is people that have either changed their jobs recently, they've recently entered the work market, or they've even changed from jobs and got promoted. So we're pretty excited to have that counterbalance to see what the companies think is happening versus the people who are actually impacted by this current hiring market. So well, we're going to start with that first panel, and we've got Pat Gallagher from the Marine Exchange, Jenny Johnson, who you met earlier, and Tom Wiker from Gallagher Marine Services and ECM. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to start off with the very easy question, which is each of you take a couple minutes, tell us about yourself, the company that you work for, and how it's impacting or has been impacted by this job market. And I'm going to start with Tom. As of recently, you are the largest company out of this panel. So,
Thanks, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. First, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. This is a subject that is near and dear to my heart because I have a 26-year-old son and a 23-year-old daughter, both of whom are my daughter just entered the job market, so it'll be interesting to see the second panel and those individuals and what they have to offer. My background: I'm the president of Gallagher Marine Systems. I took over this position from Dave Barry in June of 22. I'm thrilled to be where I am. I started here back in 1999, having come out of the U.S. Coast Guard, like so many in the QIIMT and similar industries. Before that, as I said, I was in the Coast Guard. I sailed deck for several years, went to Coast Guard headquarters, uh, working at the NRC, which wasn't the most exciting job in the world, but at least it gave me some exposure to policymakers and things like that. Ended up in Philadelphia as Port State Control Boarding Officer, Pollution Investigator, and Facility Inspector. So my current role as president of Gallagher, we are just merged/acquired ECM Maritime. Before that, we took over this compliance system. So we're experiencing a lot of growth. And with that, we are also bringing individuals on to support that growth. It's an interesting time for Gallagher because of that. The thing that I always like to talk about when we're hiring people is we really have kind of three areas that we look at. We have our technical services and response services divisions, which require specialized people. For technical services, retired masters, chief engineers, marine inspectors, and things of that nature. Response services, you have your Coast Guard pollution investigator types, former OSROs, things of that nature. And then the third and arguably most important category is those people who are writing and maintaining our thousands of vessel response plans for the vessels and clients, because they've got to have certain, abilities and characteristics. They've got to be patient, detail oriented, well organized. There's a lot that goes with that, and we're able to kind of mold them as they come out of college or wherever they're coming from, to be able to facilitate that for our many clients. So again, thank you, Mark, for making me a part of this, and I'm looking forward to it.
awesome. And thank you for that introduction of yourself. And just for the audience, we Crowley have just this past year signed Gallagher as our primary spill management team, QI services. So it's a really good strategic partnership, and we'll be covering things like that as these two panels carry forward. All right, not to be confused, we have another Gallagher. So Patrick Gallagher, go ahead.
Well, I want to start by saying thanks, Mark, and also thanks, Dan, for hosting this conference and inviting me. When we went to set up some of the planning for this conference, I think one of the directions that came out when we were brainstorming it was that we wanted to provide something that was on everybody's mind and also something relevant and maybe a bit outside the normal lane. So I congratulate you for bringing this to the forefront because, like you said on the introduction, this is on everybody's mind. So not just the emergency response community, but it's within the maritime industry heavily. I hear this all the time. So, just briefly to introduce myself, I'll probably spend a little bit more time than I normally would introducing myself, just because to give you some perspective on some of my thoughts and ideas and why I think the way I do. I am also a prior coastie. I retired a few years ago, mostly in response, and that's search and rescue, law enforcement, and pollution response. I retired out of Hawaii as the chief of response, but I started out as an enlisted quartermaster aboard ships. I was on the Coast Guard Cutter Mellon, Steadfast out of Astoria, and from there I went off to New York City after 9/11 to do boardings. I led a team, a small team of boarding officers doing high interest vessel boardings off the port of New York and New Jersey. And from there, I went to Station, New York as the XO, got picked up for graduate school, finished my degree in financial management, which absolutely blew my mind because I didn't know anything about financial management, and ended up with a degree in accounting. Went to do a payback at Coast Guard headquarters, and it truly was a payback. It was very painful and pretty hardcore, kind of stressful, doing budget for 4 years. But I learned an awful lot about the organization and also what the organization values because you figure out what they spend their money on, not just what they say. And came back to Seattle. I was the chief of enforcement at the sector, and then, like I said, I finished up as the response chief in Hawaii. And that's where I met Todd Duke, actually, as there was a vessel in flames on the beach. So thanks, Todd, for flying down and helping us out so many years ago with the Pacific Paradise. Anyway, I'm now the executive director of the Marine Exchange. No affiliation, just because of my last name, to Gallagher Marine. Although I would, I don't know, maybe I'm a co-owner somewhere. We'll find out. I'll investigate that. And I picked this job up 2 years ago. Phenomenal organization. It's the best job I've ever had. But it's a very small organization. I think there's 11 of us right now. And I think I'm here because we've successfully recruited and so far retained, at least as of today, some younger people. And that I've actually been asked about that quite a bit in the past year or so, how that gets done. And I don't know if I have a really good answer to it, but we'll kind of attempt that today to sort of dig into some of the more subtle nuances of hiring people. My goal is to expand the Marine Exchange. If you're not familiar with the Marine Exchange, what we do is we track ships. We're a nonprofit, been around for 43 years. As vessels arrive and depart, we are tracking it through our own AIS network and providing data and other services, including admin and a full suite. It's hard to describe. It's I don't have a 30-second elevator pitch for the Marine Exchange because we just do way too much. So I could go into all kinds of things, but that's probably its own panel, to be quite honest with you. So I'm excited to be here, very excited to be here. I also have a personal vested interest in this topic because I have two young daughters, soon enough to go off to college, enter the workforce, and I'm very keen to the challenges of a new generation. Just so a little bit more about me, I'm firmly Gen X. I'm right in the middle. I love and any prototypical stereotype you can make about Gen X, I probably fit it. So I identify deeply with it, and I think a lot about this. And I'm also very curious to hear what Sarah has to say after this. So thank you.
No worries. And I brought in a ringer. You met her earlier. You met her on the previous panels, which was Women in Power in the Emergency Response Community. But we didn't give her a chance to explain who she was and what she does and the company that she has founded. So, Jenny, take it away.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for inviting me to be here today. Yes, I'm still here, Jenny Johnson. I'm the founder and president of Maritime Inclusion Partners, which is a maritime culture consulting service. So, what I do is partner with maritime organizations to help them cultivate an environment and a culture that is inclusive of all people. I also support them in any of their sexual assault, sexual harassment prevention and response programs and procedures. And I also help with workforce development. So, not specific to their recruiting processes per se, but I work with some maritime schools and other organizations and nonprofits to continue to dig deep to get people interested in the maritime industry. I've been in the industry for more than 25 years, including 8 years at sea myself, as well as 10 years as a mariner recruiter. So I am very, very, very aware of the issues at hand and the problems that everybody's facing when it comes to recruiting in all areas, but definitely specifically with the maritime industry. I'm a hawse piper. I did not go to a maritime academy. I did not. I sailed as a limited officer, but not deep sea. Deep sea, I was on deck, chip and paint, and so I bring a very diverse background from ammo ships, tankers. Mega yachts, small passenger cruise boats, running high adventure programs for the Boy Scouts of America in the Bahamas on a 34-0 day. I've been a little bit of everywhere within the industry, and I think that that brings something really unique to the conversation. So I was really excited when Mark asked me to be on this panel today because it is, pun intended, in my wheelhouse. So thank you, Mark.
Yeah, and we're hoping that we do have great takeaways from these conversations. That some people who are listening to this as a podcast, those of you that are on the live webinar, go, ah, why don't we do that? Why couldn't we think of that? So that's any nugget of information that we can glean from these conversations is a win, and I'm looking for the wins. So Tom, we're going to start with you. Again, you've got a lot of employees and subcontractors that report up to you. What's it been like, especially with the pandemic and with the workforce changing, the work style changing, where we're going far more remote and then swinging back in the opposite direction currently? What's it been like hiring new team members?
It's been difficult. Um, I think that's probably, I don't think anyone here is going to disagree with that. Um, as an industry and just certainly across all industries, it's been difficult. We've had some successes, and I don't want to say failures, just some that just didn't work out. I think it's been good in a sense that I mean, first of all, we have a very good retention rate at Gallagher. We're really proud of that. We have a lot of young people like myself who've grown old here, and that's a wonderful thing because you have continuity and whatnot. So I think our hiring practices, we certainly target individuals that fit into this type of an industry, this job. It doesn't matter whether you're in our technical services, response, or plans areas. It takes a tremendous amount of commitment, respective to which job you're filling. So, it could be a lot of, sacrifice in terms of being away, long hours, weekends, things like that. So, that in and of itself, when we get into job descriptions and scopes, might scare some people away, because I think even before the pandemic, it was that way. But I would say, again, after the pandemic, we found that some of the individuals that we bring in that are candidates, after we go through our vetting process of resumes and whatnot, and people that seem like good fits, it just may not be what each other are looking for, because they are looking perhaps for something, we find in a lot of the interviews, people want to know how much they're going to get paid before they want to know what they're doing, and I find that a bit it's a turnoff, and you really when younger people are looking for the money and not really the reward of the job itself, that's a problem. So that's one area. I would say, we've done really overall, we've done well in hiring people that have stayed with us, with a few exceptions. So I would say, just as a general comment, that it's gone reasonably well. A lesson learned that I would share is just that, during the pandemic, we were doing a lot of virtual interviews, as I'm sure everyone was, and they don't necessarily reflect the true character or individual like it does in a real interview. And we found out in one or two examples that what we were getting from a virtual perspective wasn't necessarily what we were getting in a real perspective, if that makes any sense. So that was one of the lessons learned that we took out of it.
Did you guys just, I know this is not one of the scripted questions, did you guys take stock of your successes? See if there was any trends on how those successes were hired or found or located even? How did you
Um,
source them? Anything like that?
Well, again, I mean that again, I'm trying to draw this back to the categories of hires that we have, specialized, and then I hate saying specialized and non-specialized, because again, the where the rubber meets the road is the individuals that are producing plans and things like that every day. When I say specialized, that's where we're going through basically our network, friends, colleagues, and whatnot, to be able to uh, get your ear to the ground and find out who's out there, who's getting out of the Coast Guard, what people are leaving jobs that fit into a technical services role or fit into a response role. When we're talking about individuals coming out of college, we do what are traditional targeting, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn, things like that, and go through a process, through a group of individuals here. We put them through, we go through, we shortlist, and then from that point, we create probably 2 or 3 person panels that will interview people and go through the process. As far as successes, Mark, I mean, I can just tell you that the people we've hired since the or during the pandemic, we've only had 1 or 2 that didn't work out. And I'm going to just spitball, but I think we're probably about 5 to 7 that we brought on. So, I think that's a reasonably good success rate in terms of those that worked out and those that didn't.
Awesome. All right, Jenny, I'm going to throw it over to you because some of that was in your wheelhouse yet again. Uh, Trends. What is being reported across the maritime industry that you're involved with when it comes to recruiting tactics, I guess is what I'm looking for, and what should companies be considering to start to alter or do differently, which has shown some additional successes that they may not have had with traditional recruiting tactics.
So, the big thing right now is bonuses, right? You see that all over the place. Everybody's throwing hiring bonuses um, on their job postings and things like that. So there's a big trend with that, which I'm sure does generate some initial nibbles at the time. Um, but you know, when we're looking to attract and retain the Gen Zers, that the face value stuff isn't quite going to cut it for them. And so, I really would like to see more of a shift of targeting, not necessarily targeting, but showcasing organizations for their purpose, how they treat their people, things like that, to start to get that click through so that they can attract that younger generation, because the bonuses out the gate, that I mean, they're this generation really just want to know the whole thing out front, so like Tom was saying, they want to know how much they're going to make before they even start the job. And that's how they've been. That's their generation. It's part of who they are. Is they want to be able to see the end game before they've even got to the start line, and that can be really hard for the rest of us to why can't you just take this job? Really just take it. So I think having just a lot more in those tactics that showcase the company for their purpose and how the person can be personally connected to the organization. So that kind of gets missed a lot, is that companies are missing that people want to feel like they're being a part of something that is a part of the greater good, and just saying, $5,000 for this and that isn't enough to get them to click through. But as far as trends go, that bonus thing is across the board. I see it everywhere.
So the focus on that particular organization's culture, I guess, would be the word that I would key in on. Is a factor beyond the bonus, beyond the pay scale. It's do I belong here? Am I being included here? And can can a candidate really tell that from an interview?
They can, they can, because they're depending on on how that interview goes, um, the who's being interviewed, right? So when we talk about panel interviews, which I think are fabulous, but if let's say let's use myself as example, and I'm a woman and I'm white, I come in and there's this panel of all, like, 60-year-old men, I'm not going to relate to that room at all. And if that's the example that I see, I'm already going to be apprehensive of whether or not I'm going to be feel included in that organization. And so making sure those panels are very, very diverse is super helpful when someone's going through that process. Because I mean, the generation is just far more, they're pickier. They want to make sure they're making the right decision. It's not just for the bread and butter anymore. And so, yeah, definitely through that process. And then, making sure that you're using gender neutral language and all that kind of stuff. That's going to ring true with the Gen Zers. And there's a lot of work that can be done there. Job descriptions, same thing. You can use software and AI to run your job descriptions and job postings, to vet them to see if your wording is too masculine, too feminine, is it neutral. I mean, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's stuff out there that can help you.
Okay, I just got like three things out of that one. I don't know about everybody else. So yes, this is awesome. Patrick, so you've got a huge success. She's sitting right next to me. She's going to be on the next panel. How'd you do that? This is, like you said, very near and dear to you. Are you the Gen X whisperer?
Mhm.
Or the Gen Z whisperer, I guess?
Yes, I am. No, I don't know. So a couple of things that I thought about while I was listening to Tom and Jenny. I think the reason they want to know stuff like compensation up front, they want transparency, is because we've entered the what I think of as like the great era of uncertainty. So what I have now is no longer available to this generation. I had a bit of a security blanket, even like within the Coast Guard. I had a defined pension, which is gone. I think it's not unreasonable to expect more from an employer because they're not receiving that anywhere else. So I think the shift in the mindset is a bit more where you sort of wrap around the whole person, so to speak, where you're going to have to give more in terms of training and a sense of security, certainly a sense of purpose. But when I look at the mega trends, I mean, the biggest one right now for this generation is compensation, and beyond that, they want to know that it's they want to see the transparency in that. So when you post a job, if you're, and I know state laws are changing right now. I think Washington state law just changed. I'm not positive about that, but you should be posting how much they're going to make. They need to know that. Otherwise, why would they even bother? Plus, these hiring processes have become very complicated. There's some great technology out there, which I think is great, but it in a way makes it easier, but in another way, it makes it really difficult when you can, post your resume online or apply to anything easily. uh, it gets really washed out. I know we've posted jobs where we go out and seek, and we're almost afraid of the deluge that's coming to us. But I think this generation deserves to know exactly where they're going to be in this organization and how much they're going to get paid. I mean that I I'm gonna go from my own perspective. I retired from the Coast Guard, and I hadn't looked for a job in decades. And in that period of time, everything changed. So in a way, I can sympathize with any young person. In another way, I can't. I had a lot more experience, but going out into this market and looking for a job is very difficult and totally different than what I'm used to. And it gets confusing. And I sat for interviews that, I mean, it took 4 months. I went through 5 panels, and then you never hear a single word afterwards. And I think that's disrespectful. I do. I think a lot of this comes down to a single word, and that word is dignity. And so long as you can, even somebody who's obviously not qualified, and you may just take a hard pass on, you wouldn't even normally look at, you still owe it to that person to, at least have something to explain, exactly why. And this is, I believe, what this generation is seeking.
Okay, more nuggets of
I
information.
think, Mark, if I can just add one more thing. I mean, I think we kind of got on the topic of compensation, but also, I mean, a hybrid work environment is extremely important to this new generation of people. I mean, it is. And I wouldn't even say just a new generation. I think it's just most people, to generalize, feel like they want or need a hybrid work environment. And that's a part of it as well. So I want to
Um,
make
if,
sure to
Agreed.
if
I'm
I
one
could
of those
interject
people. Yeah.
real quick on that, just one point, I would not have taken this job had I not had it. We're talking, and now I'm referencing our first panel of women who talked about work-life balance. They talked about raising a family. I went 22 years where I moved my family around all over this nation, doing all sorts of things, and destroyed my wife's career, basically. And if I was not able to support her career, I would not have taken this job. So I appreciate the idea that I live within a hybrid environment, and I try very hard to provide that as well. It doesn't always work. It's a work in progress, and I have lots of mixed feelings about it, but I do understand it. That is, the generation is looking for flexibility in the work environment. They're looking for meaning. Jenny just said it. They want to know that something matters, and impact, and along with that, compensation. I mean, these people have some heavy duty loans. Uh the, they like I said, I'll just say it again, they have a lot of uncertainty in their lives, and I don't think that's going away.
Yeah, agreed.
Yep. And just to get back to an earlier comment from you, Patrick, the process, the waiting times, things like that are that has an impact on how I feel about a company when I'm doing my applications. I'm working with somebody. Uh, I'm trying to assist somebody who's trying to get into the market, and please submit your resume. Now go to our website and put all of that information line item by line item back into our format. And when I interview people, I actually just take their download of their PDF and I read that. So being aware of the experience is what we're going to be covering in the next panel. But I think you definitely landed on it. Is uh, even how we interview people is so important.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to open this up and see if any of you want to fess up or admit. Uh, have you had feedback from a negative situation as part of the hiring process? You don't have to say it was your current company or your current situation, but has anybody walked away from your interview process and just gave you the truth, and it helped because you learned from what they didn't like about the experience?
I in in a case I can think of with Gallagher, we just again I relate it to more or less the virtual interview process and then taking the position that wasn't entirely what the person understood it to be. Because like I opened up with, there's just a huge amount of sacrifice to get into this type of work that we do, again, in all facets. Doesn't matter what it is. And we work hard, and we do take care of our employees through, whether it be time off as compensation for work, or financial compensation, whatever it is. I mean, we really try to foster a healthy work life balance, but sometimes that's not possible, particularly when you have casualties that require 14, 16-hour days and over long periods of time, extended trips to Asia or Europe or wherever it may be, which really sounds sexy. But when you're doing it and you're going airport to airport and hotel to hotel and meeting to meeting, it's a grind, because your life is literally upside down. Not to mention that you got two little ones or whatever at home. Your diet gets a bit messed up. So again, that would be an example where, you know, in reflecting upon, did we do a good job of presenting all of these things to the people that we interviewed? So that was something that we learned, to try to really do a better job, almost to point out the reasons you shouldn't take the job, rather than why you should. You know.
Yeah, and Jenny, this kind of relates to your previous experiences of recruiting mariners. I mean, mariners, it's not really a surprise that they're going to have to go away for months on end. Um, but even that's changing. The length of contracts is always a discussion as to, hey, I want 40 days, I want 30 days. Um, but the lifestyle doesn't change. They're still going away for periods of time. What have you heard recently about that? What kind of experiences have you had previous that could lend to this conversation?
You mean the negative feedback
Yeah.
about the process? Yeah.
Yep.
So definitely to kind of piggyback on what Patrick was saying, is these processes take entirely too long. They just do. And it doesn't matter what industry that you're in, it takes too long to hear back from anybody. And you don't know if you're ever going to hear back from somebody. And so, it within specifically to the Mariners in my previous organization, that was the world I had control over. And so I committed to responding to every single applicant. And that is seems like in the recruiting world and HR world, like if people's heads like explode when I say this, but really you throw a couple templates together in the system and you respond, and we would respond letting them know what they were missing. We need a towing endorsement. We need someone with 3 years on a tanker. And all you do is modify one sentence of your template. It's 4 seconds of your day, and you've dispositioned that candidate. And so I would hear about the administrative side of that organization, which did not respond to everybody. And that was definitely a huge complaint that it just took too long. But then also, too, even on the Mariner side, the amount of time I spent chasing down hiring managers to just tell me no on somebody sometimes was months. And so organizations definitely need to be more focused on who's making these decisions, who's monitoring how long it's taking for somebody to say yay or nay. And none of this should be happening in a vacuum. There needs to be oversight on all of these decisions. And then the other area too is it should take no more than 4 clicks to apply for a job. And one of them is finding the job on the website of the company. That's click 1. And in 3 more clicks, that candidate should be done. If it's taking any of your organizations longer than that, that is a huge part of your problem.
Agreed, agreed, and agreed. I am one of those. So when I was at the academy, I applied for a job knowing I was going to graduate in May, June. I applied in January, February, and did not hear back from that company until November. And I had already had another job by then, and I ended up taking it. But to go 9 months without hearing a single word, it was a feast or famine situation for that maritime company where they needed to fill positions for compliance reasons, but they were full and they didn't want to offer, but their website was open. So there's some companies that immediately take down non-open positions, and there are other companies that leave all the positions open. Feel free to apply. We may not get back to you for a year. So that's one of those opportunities that almost missed, and I almost took a very different career path as a result of it. So, but that was also 23 years ago. So people are a little bit more able to communicate. There's email now.
Mark, I can attest to support what you're saying because my 23-year-old daughter, who's a supply chain major out of Tennessee, um, she was interested in the maritime sector because of my background, and she was interviewing with a very well-known company in the maritime industry that did exactly what you're saying. That she interviewed, showed a lot of promise, and it was sort of like the breadcrumbs were leading down the road of employment, but there was never closure on it. After follow up with people that she interviewed with and follow up with HR and trying to go through channels that I had, and it just kind of went into the abyss. So, yeah.
Yeah.
it-
So just that's another one of the nuggets to walk away with. If you're looking for people, don't fish, don't leave them out there. So
Hey Mark, if I can,
yeah.
what's sort of swirling through my brain is the ICS concept of span of control. So if you have a hiring process that involves 6 layers of uh, you've got to get through 50 people or something like that, which I've been on those processes on the opposite end, where it's like, where are we headed with this? Why have I now talked to 24 people over 4 months? It makes no sense. I would tighten that span of control, and that requires a degree of trust that sometimes is tough to get over. But it's really, I mean, you're talking about 5 to 7 people who should probably be able to hire somebody, depending on the function, of course. But if you're going through like the final hiring decision on everything is like, and you're in a large corporation or bureaucracy, and the final hiring decision goes to the president or the executive director or whatever, then I think that's a flawed system. You've got to relinquish some of that control.
So to that point, Tom, do you meet with every single hire?
No, I mean that you're not empowering your people if you do, if you follow that. You've got to have trust in your managers and, all the way down. So no, I believe here we have a culture that we really do push things down to let people make decisions. And again, like I talked about, we have great retention rate here, I think, and that's one of the reasons for it is that younger people get to make decisions and do things that they might not otherwise do at a different company.
So the big one I think is how do they find you? We're a niche industry. If it's not your brother's cousin's friend who did this one thing out in Santa Barbara with Clean Seas, they're never going to know about us. But what you mentioned a couple of them earlier, so I want to hear from Tom, but I also want to hear from Jenny on this one specifically. Where is this generation looking when they're looking to find jobs, other than, hey, I'm going to go Google my ideal career?
You mean where are they looking to get
how do
employment? I
how
mean,
do they find out about Gallagher and Gallagher's openings? They're not knowledgeable about Gallagher yet. So how are they finding out about you enough
yeah,
to
I
apply?
that Mark, that's a great question. I mean, I can only tell you that we have really tried to do more insofar as podcasts and getting out there and appearing to look kind of like connected to this generation because you know it's even I'm not on Facebook or anything like that. It's not I'm not interested in that kind of stuff, but like that makes me kind of different, and I have to play catch up with that. So I depend on people in this company to tell me that we need to do a better job of reaching out via social media and channels like that. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, because again, we are in such a specialized niche industry that it's more or less us reaching out to people, and just putting, following the standard, like I said, Indeed and whatnot, LinkedIn, to try to go fishing that way. Or again, you kind of alluded to it, but if you know people in the industry that might know someone that can connect them to us, to fill a need, that's another way. So
Because we all know a guy named Larry. There you go. He helps everyone. Jenny, what about you? Where you did a lot of the college fair type stuff for a while. That's kind of going by the wayside, it seems, especially when they couldn't meet in person for 2.5 years.
Yeah. So, the answer to the question is it's elusive because the platforms are ever changing, right? And so the minute I find out what the latest social media platform is, it's already old to someone who's 20 years younger than me. And so, it really kind of to, talking about the nicheness of maritime emergency response, just anything in this scope, you know, there has to be more to be done more on like more like on a public service level of like generalization of this being a career. So I'll tell you a story. I was a Sea Scout in Portland, Oregon, and I spent from the age of 14 to 18, 19 when I jumped off to be a deckhand, um, on the Columbia River every Saturday, sometimes the whole weekend, every Tuesday night, sometimes Tuesday nights and Thursday nights. 2 weeks on the summer doing long cruise, like the whole thing, watching all of these tugs and everybody go by. And I did not know that you could be a mariner for a career. It never, and they didn't talk to me about it in the program. You just went into the Coast Guard or you went into the Navy or you went into the Marine Corps. They never talked about being a mariner ever. And it wasn't until I had my first deckhand job that I even remotely got, oh, you can do this for like a career. So just really with all of this, the scope of this industry and emergency response and all these really kind of like you said niche things, is that we need to be focusing more on general advertisements. I always talk about like you can't listen to the radio or turn on the television without seeing an ad be like a truck driver that's funded by the National Truck Driving Association or whatever. Like we're not doing any of that on that scope. And then we're not really coming together as an industry on any of the social media platforms to put forth real campaigns that are robust and that are fast and that have that clickbait. We're not doing that. And really, if you go on YouTube now and try and find videos on being a professional mariner, you're going to get people on there that are making these videos themselves, and they're not necessarily portraying the career the best that it can be, right? There's no control of that messaging. It's whatever they think at that time. So, um, we do not have a handle on this, is what I'm trying to say, and that we can that it can all be done better.
What about you, Patrick? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts. We're small, which I think is an advantage. I really do. And so when we go to hire somebody, and it's about 50% of our workforce, believe it or not, in the past 2 years has turned over. Uh, it it's pretty selective. We go out and try and find that person, and all I've done for recent hires is sort of just listen to the ideas that people will present. I know Cynthia Reed had a great idea about going into there's a state unemployment job board, so there's people seeking it, and you can search this, and I've never heard of this, but she reaches out, and instead of the pull method, you sort of, it's more directed. And then our most recent intern was that came directly from an idea from Sarah. Just, I had a certain idea about how to fulfill a function, and she recommended something completely different, and we tried it, and so far so good. So I would say, just sort of listening to that team, each function is going to be a little bit different, I think, and pretty customized. So just be open to ideas. There's a lot of resources out there, but I think you've got to go out and look for these people rather than the reverse, where you just throw that job out and see what comes back.
Awesome. All right, and here's the question. So I'll let anyone jump on this one. How is this job market going to stabilize? What type of event? The pandemic didn't start it, but it definitely added to it. What stabilizes the current industry-wide what appears to be a shortage, but it's not really a shortage. People are still out there. What's going to stabilize that perceived shortage?
Great question, Mark.
I leave it to the
I
audience. Is there
I
are there any
have
questions?
no, I have Mark. I have thoughts on this. So I you're right. There are people. There are people, and now I just want to the preface that my thoughts are very specific to maritime and going. So I just want to put that out there. Is that um first of all, the industry has to be made more welcoming for people. So, we as an industry are slowly and painfully running out of old white guys and have done nothing to, or very little, to change the culture at sea to make it more welcoming for women, people of color, LGBTQ. And by doing that, we have just basically hacked off our right arm and left a bunch of meat on the bone that we can't get to. And so drastic effort has to be made right now to eradicate harassment, bullying, beyond policy writing, beyond going to Congress and test, like beyond that, like real action on border vessels. I tell companies all the time, like if you have vessels, I don't care if you don't have a single woman working for you right now, there should be sanitary bins in your heads. You should have smaller coveralls available. There should be smaller size gloves available because when that woman does join that vessel, it shouldn't be a separate meeting that everyone has to prep for the woman to join and have to have special things ordered for her. She's already in a goldfish, and she already feels singled out. So there's draft, and all my ideas cost money. By the way, I'm fully aware of all my ideas cost money, but I have no problem telling people I hold the solutions to the mariner shortage crisis, but it will cost everybody a lot of money. Um, those are just a few of the things that need to happen, but then also too, we need to start looking at, again, this is going to cost money, how long hitches are, how long are we keeping people at sea, adjusting shipping rules so people can have work life balance and be home, um, monitoring and looking at the cost of SDCW courses and how much are we putting on people. Does everyone have to go to a college to be successful as a mariner now? Kind of, sort of. I mean, you can hosepipe it like I did, but it's going to be very expensive and take you a long time. And there's a giant demographic of mariners that have like an AB and nothing else. And they've been up the Mississippi the last 5 years. They'd like to go offshore and expand their career, but they don't have 2 years and not $60,000 and to put themselves through something like that so that they can go offshore. So where's the OJT? Where we can build bigger mariners out of the ones that are already holding credentials today. So there's a lot that can be done that could balance this out. Again, I'm aware it all costs a lot of money.
And I'm going to piggyback on that because at Crowley, we are going through a renewed diversity inclusion, a new look at it more than anything else. And I'm not going to harp on that. Yes, you need diversity. Yes, you need inclusion. But there's a woman that works for us down in logistics named Emily Reiblin. She's very well published. She's a safety expert, but more importantly, she's about the newest terminology. And I know buzzwords. Everybody loves buzzwords, but the buzzwords are psychological safety. What Jenny just described is creating the environment for the person to be there. But if we're not training our leaders to understand that there is a generational gap, and screaming and yelling doesn't work anymore. It works at home. That's what my mom got to do. No, my mom did not yell at me. That was the Zavarian brothers in high school. But there's a big emphasis on the work environment and retaining employees. You can have the best diversity and inclusion program, and there's like an 80% chance it's going to fail if you don't have a focus on also creating psychological safety for the newer employees specifically, because if they've been there for decades, they feel safe. They like your company. They're not going anywhere unless you get rid of them. However, to maintain a newer employee, take some time, research the topic. And if you can get a hold of any of Emily's writings, Emily Reiblin, she is just a master at capturing it and putting it into layman's terms. And that was 2 male terms describing a woman's work. There you go. All right, let me look at the board. Great job, the hiring process. How about modern retention ideas after the hire? So you gave them the hiring bonus. You've tried to give them logical work-life balance environments that we were talking about, even considering shortening time away from family. Any other ideas? Because we're going to be talking to some of those people in a few minutes. Any other ideas from a leadership perspective, which would be all about after they're hired? What's the focus?
I think just exposure to other parts of the company and the ability to cross train to I think of our plans personnel who, again, like I said, are really the backbone of this company on a day-to-day basis. And they do so much, but it's nice to have an offering where they can be a part of the spill management team or go aboard a ship to accompany our technical services team, because they're looking at diagrams for vessel response plans and whatnot. But when you're on a ship and you can now equate a diagram to what a vessel looks like, that's important. So it's hard to really kind of couple it up in one jar, but we really try to do a good job pre-pandemic. We got TWIC cards for plans people, so that we had that ability to put them on ships and things like that. I think that's so important, just to let them know that we're willing to spend the money and commit the time, take them out of the office, and if they're interested, be a part of the other parts of the company. So I think investment of training, and then really positive reinforcement. I mean, I just today, we had a person in the company that did a good job on a spill response, and I sent him an email and just said, thank you for your efforts and stuff like that. It goes a long way, and that was free. So it's not all about money. It's just about, I think, I said earlier, you empower your employees to do different things, to make decisions. Don't get in their knickers about stuff. Just let them do it. And it's okay that if they fall down, don't get in their face about it. Help them to avoid doing it, avoid making a mistake in the future by positive reinforcement, things like that.
Awesome. Patrick, any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, Mark, just I I think we've got to focus on the whole person, and that includes what's going on outside of their professional life. And it may feel to older generations a little bit touchy-feely because nobody really cared about, like nobody considered what I was going through when I was 23 years old. Whoever I was working for, they never asked my opinion. So we have to get out of this mindset that, well, it doesn't really matter because you're young. I think that's over. We need to just completely shift our mindset and think more about what's going on in their life and trying to accommodate for those things as best as we can. And yeah, I agree. It's not just compensation. A lot of times it's time and just sort of, again, the flexibility. I think this is really the core of why this generation is looking for those things. I don't feel like they feel completely safe. And I'll go back to some of our prior conversation talking about stability. We're not in an era of stability. I feel like that's probably long gone. I'm not sure when it's going to come back. We're in the era of emergency, which should provide a ton of meaning for the people who are looking to recruit in this space. But they need to know that they're going to be okay and that you're going to take care of them. And if they're not convinced of that, they're probably going to keep looking. So those are my thoughts on retaining people. I think you really need to take care of them in a way that you were not taken care of. So I don't know how else to say that.
No, I think you nailed it right on the head. So we're getting to the end of the time, and I see Dan has come back to us.
Reappeared from away to bring it to a close. You know, I like what very much what Jenny said, because I actually about credentialing and STCW, because I did park my master's license for continuity because I could not afford not only the cost but the time to go through all of the classes annually that I would have been required to do to renew. And I was looking at not only a week of STCW, but 40 hours of leadership. There was some other class I was going to have to take. I was going to have to take 3 weeks worth of time off of work and classes to renew. And as a result, I parked my license, right? And it's unfortunate. I do want to add one thing from my experience before we kind of go out for the panels, that the other thing for retention is that people will stay at a job to work for a manager, a boss that they like and respect. And they'll even stay at a job that pays them less than they could make somewhere else to stay in that environment. But they will leave a high-paying job, and I've done it myself, to get away from bad management. So that is just a really important thing to realize, that we have a responsibility to treat people well.
Agreed. All right, I definitely want to thank you guys. You probably didn't know what you were getting to when you got that first email from me or text message from me, but this has been great. And I know that there are people, you know, once this becomes an episode of the tactics meeting, that are going to hear it and they're going to be like, oh, that was great. That information's helpful. So just know you've already helped. So thank you very much. And next up, we are going to rip the Band-Aid off and hear from the people who just got hired or just changed jobs. So sorry, Patrick.
All right, so we're going to take 5 minutes. We're going to swap around our panel. We'll come back with the counterpoint, the counterbalance to this argument. We're going to hear from Generation Z. We go to double letters after this, right?
X, Y, and Z. Yep.
Okay.
It'll be all the generations. So.
All the generations.
Thank you.
All right. Stand by. We'll be right back. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the tactics meeting. I hope you found it enjoyable, entertaining, and informative. If you have an idea for a topic or would like to be a guest, you can email me. The email address is podcast@thetacticsmeeting.online. If you feel like you get good education out of the show and you'd like to be a sponsor, head on over to thetacticsmeeting.com and click the supporter button. We would love to have whatever support we can get to keep these programs running. Now let's get back to work.